Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture. And yes, I am hard to kill. And before I introduce my guest, I do want to remind everyone this episode is brought to you by my sponsor, Pocket Comics, who have books like Palace of the Golden Princess and White Lily. And you can find those books at pocketjackcomics.com. And if you like female empowerment, great art, sexy covers, all that good stuff, feel free to go check that out. And I do not think you'll be disappointed. But enough of that, because I have with me comic creator Dave Schwartz. Hopefully, or Swartz. So hopefully I got it right. If I didn't, you feel free to correct me. But welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. No, you got it good enough there. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, I am excited because obviously you got a lot going on. You have Confederate Monsters book 1 through 5 out there, and obviously it's a 6-issue series. I think, if and correct me again if I'm wrong, but obviously this is the 5th installment of it.
Yep.
But before we get into that whole thing, obviously you're a comic artist. You've done a bunch of other stuff. I think you've done some lettering. So why don't you give everybody kind of a quick introduction of who you are, because you're not just brand new in comics.
No, so again, I'm a comic book artist, writer, letterer, pretty much everything that there is to do with comic books I can do. And I do for my own series, Confederate Monster, which is basically the world of Frankenstein meets the Civil War. So yeah, I've been doing comics for about 10 years now. Started out doing some self-publishing stuff, but then I quickly kind of transitioned into doing projects with other collaborators. So I've been doing professional illustration for about 4 years now. And that's really propelled me forward in what I'm doing and the quality and the speed at which I can do it. And so I've been able to now kind of juggle both a career doing other people's projects as well as working on my own again. So that's where I've kind of been picking up with Confederate Monster after a couple of years hiatus. And we are only 1 issue away after issue 5 from finishing it. So I'm excited to get through the story and see how what people think of the ending.
So I want to talk about that before we get into Confederate Monster a little bit, because I think it's interesting because, and it might have been Jonathan Hendricks who said this, where he is the name. So when he goes to Boom or he goes to Scout or he goes to Marvel or DC, it's his name. Or it might have been Michael Bennis or Brian Bennis who said it, where, or Mark Miller might have said it, or they all might have said it at some point, is that at some point you become the name, and it's not, and then hopefully your audience follows you with your projects around, but you're not tied to anything. And so obviously when you're doing your own project and then you're collaborating with somebody like, Mike Tiener at Bad Bug, obviously you're there. And then, because I think that that's really an interesting philosophy in comics. And I think the debate, to be honest, because some people say, I don't want to be tied to a company and doing a project with a company, but at the same time, you're building a brand. It's kind of like, I'll use a wrestling analogy. John Cena's brand is related to WWE, but he also has his own brand outside of that. So when he's on WWE, it naturally promotes every other project that he's doing outside of WWE and vice versa. And so I don't know how you feel about that, but with your work, but I think that's a very interesting discussion that sometimes happens in comics.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I feel like there is a nice synergy there between having your work sort of publicized through other publishers or other companies, and then working for yourself and bringing some of their fans into your fan base, and then you can kind of bring your fan base along with you to the other project that you then do for someone else, and then grow that sort of community in that way. I think it's a natural kind of synergy, to be honest with you. And so far, one that I feel like has been fairly embraced by everyone that I've worked with. So, whenever I put out a project for myself, I'm always seeing, Mike Tiener or, Caleb Palmquist, who's another big time collaborator of mine. And some of the new guys I've been working with, Zach Chapman and Sean Wood, who've got projects on Kickstarter right now as well. I think especially with the Kickstarter space, it's nice to have all these different sort of networks that we can kind of, pull from and introduce to other projects and other creators. And so far, I think it's been working pretty well, not only for me, but I think for other people I've worked with. So
No, I find it interesting because I've heard both sides of that discussion where I've heard people say, look, I want to build my own little island and my own little thing, and I don't want to collaborate with anybody and I don't want to introduce anybody. But I've also seen other people that obviously do that and want to do that, but then they also go and do their own thing, and I think it's really interesting. And that's why I bring it up because I have a podcast and we share streams, and his audience and my audience hit two different markets. And
sure,
so it's nice because it's a nice collaboration because he has a lot more, subscribers, but they want to be there for 90 seconds and I have less, but they want to be there for like 30 minutes. And so you have a
hmm
nice little fusion there going on and the show does okay because of
right,
that. But I find it fascinating. That's why I asked the question. But I do want to table some of the Kickstarter stuff, and I do want to talk about your book because it's a weird mashup, man. I'm going to tell you right now, doing Frankenstein in the Confederate South and the Civil War, it's a little bit of an interesting mashup to say the least. So, how did this idea come about? Because we know Frankenstein, we know the Civil War, the Confederacy is the bad guys, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. So, how did this all come about? Because it's a funky idea, man. I'm not gonna lie.
sure. Well, I mean, when I first started 10 years ago, I my first story was a big superhero mythical kind of thing, and I think a lot of young comic book writers, that's where we start, is our superhero story. And so I wanted to produce that first, kind of my proof of concept that I could actually do this. And so I set out to do that story. I did the thing, got to the end, didn't really do as well as I had hoped. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and I told myself I want to draw, or I want to like write up a bunch of different treatments for different genres so that I can kind of show in my next couple of pitches, publishers, that I can do different stuff. And so I wanted to create a horror story. And naturally, my first inclination was I wanted to do a Frankenstein story because I always loved Frankenstein. One of my very first actual published drawings that I ever got into any kind of magazine, which was Monster magazine, the original, was a part of a Frankenstein drawing contest. Design your own Frankenstein. I was like 8 years old. And so in ways, I don't know, I've always felt very deeply connected to the character. And I thought, I want to do a Frankenstein story. I want to kind of change the setting a bit. I want to try to change, the characterizations a bit, So one of the first things I thought was I want to really put it into a time period that we haven't really used as a backdrop very often in storytelling, at least here in America. And I thought, well, Civil War, even though it might be a bit controversial, I feel has some pretty interesting synergy when it comes to the Frankenstein story and sort of the branding of that story. When it comes to body parts being chopped off and like reattached, the Civil War was the very first war where like amputations right there on the battlefield were executed and done properly so that the soldiers could actually live a life afterwards. And anyway, it was to me close enough in time period to kind of like bridge the gap between modern times and the original story. That there was a lot of cool things that kind of propped up just me thinking about the two together. And so from there, it kind of, I felt, wrote itself. I didn't really feel like it was very hard to write that story. There were a lot of things that were very easy that came to me. Other things I had to rewrite a few times because I wanted an extra punch. But I tell the story through the lens of Igor. So it's a very kind of different way that you get to be involved in a Frankenstein story. Typically, it's either through the eyes of the monster or through Victor. But no, I wanted Igor to be the main kind of guy because this is set 8 years later. So
Yeah. Let's talk about that
yeah,
because obviously I mean, what I read of it is that it's 8 years later. Certain things sort of had to be changed a little bit, or redone, or massaged a little bit after what's happened. Because the end of Frankenstein, not. I mean, if you didn't read it by now, I mean, spoiler alert. He's chasing the monster pretty much to Antarctica.
Yeah,
Spoiler alert, guys. Sorry. It's only what 200 years old. The book.
I was just about to say only about 200 years old. So
I know I should have waited, right? I should have waited another like 10 years. My bad, guys. Next thing I'm gonna tell you, Dumbledore dies.
no,
So, but anyway, what is that like? Because obviously, if it takes place 8 years later, and then you're in this, and then stuff still happens. There's stuff
right.
going on. Obviously Igor is still around, and then now you're down south, then stuff's happening in the Civil War, and then people sort of know it's Igor, but they don't. And then there's other stuff and like figuring out that whole thing because it's interesting. I don't know how to explain this any other way beyond the fact that they're looking for the doctor because they want a monster to essentially win the war, right? But then there's other stuff, and they don't know that Igor is the doctor's Frankenstein's assistant. And so, like, you got a lot of crazy stuff going on. I don't know how to explain it any other way without ruining too much.
That's okay. Yeah, so it's obviously inspired by the original Mary Shelley story, but Igor is not actually in the original book. Igor is a character that was created more for the movie. So one of the things that I'm kind of doing with mine is I'm taking inspiration from the Mary Shelley book, but I'm sort of twisting some of the details. So in my retelling, which is a story that you can read as part of issue 0 for Confederate Monster, because Confederate Monster actually has a prequel issue, and that tells the story of kind of how we get from the original monster being reanimated to where we start off with in issue 1. So basically, my thought was, instead of the monster being reanimated, and then there's this long period of time when there's dialogue between Victor and the monster back and forth, build my bride, blah blah blah, like what we see in the original. What I would believe would happen, or could happen, would be that the monster goes on a rampage, is unstoppable, and Victor and Igor try to stop it with their wits. Ultimately, it's subdued, but then the police find out that Victor was the one that did this, so they put him in an asylum, and Igor is instructed as to how to rebuild his life, and given sort of the means to do so. And so Victor sort of stays in an asylum for years and years and years, and Igor goes across the pond and makes a new life for himself as a different person. As we meet him, he's Dr. Daniel Schmidt, and he's like a reconstructive surgeon. So his specialty is prosthetic limbs for soldiers that come back without them. So again, I take some liberties with how I present the story.
So let's talk about that, because obviously Wicked just came out, and Wicked's coming to Peacock in 8 days, in case you didn't know that. And Wicked takes some serious liberties. It's the best example with the Wizard of Oz, where there's stuff where it's, I guess, reduction history, or I think that might be the word, or redactive history. I'm not exactly sure the correct word here, but let's go know what we're talking about. But obviously, Wicked takes some serious liberties on the Wizard of Oz, what's happening, and how the hell we got to a bunch of stuff, right?
Sure.
And how the wizard isn't so good, right? So obviously there's a lot of stuff going on with that. So, what is that like? Because you have the basis of Frankenstein there, the book, and people can pick up on elements of that, and you get the idea of what's going on, but you also have a brand new product too.
Right.
And it's interesting because I feel free to disagree with me, but it's easier for me to get into something when there's elements that I immediately recognize in something.
Right.
And obviously, it's not just the Frankenstein stuff. It's also, the Civil War is pretty heavy in this book. I mean, it's not the Confederate's pretty heavy. I don't have a problem saying that either. So it's easy for me to say I know what there's elements that I recognize, but then there's also things that are brand new. And so what is that like? 'Cause I think that's what makes this fascinating as a book. Is there's 3 or 4 things that I'm like, cool, I get an idea of what this looks like. But it's also saying, cool, we're gonna swing it out left pretty far or right or to have some plot twists, for lack of a better word.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, I wanted to. I think part of the reason why I wanted to do a Frankenstein type story was that very fact. To sort of utilize a familiar property that's in the public domain. That I feel like is something that a lot of people would jump onto, and would have an easier time jumping into. And like you were saying, there is that sort of group of people that would also potentially have interest in the Civil War and history itself, especially of our country. And I felt that those things together, like you were just describing, were a very great, sort of launching off point for a lot of people, to at least build an audience. Because a lot of these things, they live or die on the size of the audience, right? And so sometimes it's a matter of grabbing attention. And I think that's part of the reason why I put the word Confederate in the title. And I know that in ways that might be hurting me. But I think in other ways, I think it's also provocative enough to make the story sort of jump out. One of the things I've been noticing, at least for me, I don't know about other people, but when I go and I'm looking for something new to watch on the streaming services, I don't know what to do. It's just like there's so much content. Like I even think to myself, like last night I was literally thinking to myself, like, man, I kind of opined for the days where I only had like 3 or 4 options, and I just picked the best one. Just because
You're bringing up something really interesting that I want to dive into a little bit. So I'm a big anime guy.
Mhm.
I spend hours trying to find good stuff, and I ask my friends for recommendations. And my friends are like, "We don't know what to watch either,"
Right,
because I've watched all the good stuff, right?
right,
All the good stuff that doesn't have 1,000 episodes. But the other day, my friend made a recommendation for a show called Psychopaths that came out in 2012, and I'm like, "Oh man, this is really good." But it's really hard to find things to watch, to read, to get involved in. And it's because there's so much. And also, I don't want to invest my time and I don't want to invest 6, 7 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours into something if it's going to suck. And then also at this point, and I have no problem to be very honest, if something is I'm 2 episodes in and it's not good, I drop it.
I agree. I've done
But
the
with comics, it's more complicated because when I'm paying $20 for something, $40 in to buy something, and this has happened to me.
right.
I'm not going to name names. I don't want to talk. I don't want to disparage anybody. But I'm like, I just spent 40 fucking dollars on this bad book. So like, but I also think so. I mean, that's how I feel. Is that so? I agree with that. But I guess I'm also curious because there is a marketing element to this because there's stuff that's provocative
Mhm.
and it gets attention.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, me and my co-host, we run a wrestling show on Fridays, and he purposely he named his side of the show Talking WWE, a play on John Oliver, you
Mhm.
know, his show because it gets attention, right? And
Sure.
he does a lot of shorts that get attention, and that's what he does. And even I play the game with micro content where it's tricky because I have content that has done 10, 20,000 views. These are the title. And so I think I mean, I don't know how you feel, but if you put the word Confederate, you're going to turn people off, but you're also going to get people to say, what the hell's this book?
Right.
And I want to be offended.
Right.
It's almost what it is. And so, but it still has to be good. But you also have to get somebody in there because it's kind of like a cover
Right.
on a comic.
Right. And that's kind of my gamble is that, it'll grab those who are interested enough to take a look. And by the time I've got them, I hope that, the issues will convince them enough to keep reading. And comics it's a tough sell sometimes, and typically, your audience just shrinks as you get closer and closer to the end. So it's a difficult thing to make sure that you can get people to the end, because that's where the meat and potatoes are typically of any story. But I think being a good writer is, you know, pushing people just enough along the way in order to make sure that they can get there, leading them in the right way, in that regard.
Did you do? Let me ask this because I agree in issues of keeping me in a story to some degree, but I'm also at a stage where it's like you got to get me your book quickly. You got to get me your book cleanly. You got to make your book affordable.
Sure.
And I mean, I don't want to spend if somebody's doing a 12 issue miniseries or a 12 issue series. I don't know what constitutes a miniseries anymore anyway, but they're doing 12 issues, right? I
Right.
don't want to be with something for the next 5 years over 12 issues.
Sure.
Like you got to bang out 12 issues in 3 years, maybe 3.5.
Right.
But like where you got to bang it out every quarter because I don't want to spend 5 years of my life with a story that I'm getting 2 times a year. Like, and I think that's also part of the problem is that I don't have enough content to consume me long enough with many people in indies. And this is why in many ways, I pulled back a lot because I don't know if I'm going to get issue 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And I've been in situations where somebody stopped for 3 years and I'm like, great. Like, what do we do now? I'll give a really good example. Saga was like that. I was on a roll with Saga, and then it took like a 2-year hiatus, and I couldn't get back into it. I just couldn't get back into it because I just like I read like 54 issues, and then after that, I just lost momentum in the whole story. And so, what is that like for you? Because I agree that the writing is, I think, in my opinion, only a part of it, but there's all these other components that also are a big factor. And there's plenty of books I probably missed that are great because they just took too long on the indie scene to get out to me.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, that's a hard thing for me. Being somebody who does these types of books himself. I did have to go through a little hiatus on this book, and I hate saying it, because I really wanted to be able to get everything out, to the people within a reasonable amount of time. But this is like a post-COVID kind of thing. Having to shift things around in my business to make sure, I could keep food on the table and keep bills paid. But I have found that when I came back to it, that I've been able to do it much better, much faster. And I'm hopeful, that I could be able to, meet a reasonable amount of expectation for delivering these books. But again, like I said, it's tough doing it all myself, and maybe that's something that for future projects I start thinking about trying to, collaborate with others to get things out faster. And maybe it's a shorter story. I don't know. But I agree with you in the sense that, it works better in your favor if you can get something consistently out to people under your brand, even if it may not be the exact same story for, a continuous run. Maybe you got 2 or 3 different books that you're doing, one right after the other.
It's tricky because, I mean, I forget who said it, but you got to remind people that you exist. So every December I take off for the month of December, and I don't really care. And then a friend of mine said, "I thought you were busy and slowing down." I'm like, dude, I've been interviewing almost like 2 times a week, and he's like, dude, I didn't know you were still like at the game. And I'm like, I came back like second week in January, and I've been doing like all this interview work. He's like, I didn't want to bother you. I'm like, but I've been posting and all this stuff. He's like, I guess I just didn't see it. Like, so like it's kind of funny, but like at this point for the last 3 years, I let everyone know, hey, I'm not interviewing in December, and I don't care who you are because there's holiday parties. I want to see my family, and well, I need a break after 11 months of interviewing. I need like legitimately time to like sleep and watch anime. It's this new concept. I've developed some bad habits. I like to rest, everybody. But all jokes aside, I think it's really interesting because, again, I don't want to produce a comic. I don't. It seems way hard and harder than I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't have the itch to do it, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't have the itch to do it. So
Hey, and again, it's a very big undertaking. I have I teach college students drawing, and they come to me after class or before class a lot and just talk to me about comics, talk to me about my job, talk to me about what they can do to do what I do. And so it's one of those things where I teach them the basics, but also teach them, like, you're going to have to do all this other stuff like branding and marketing and being able to speak eloquently about your work and yourself. Um, it's all part of the job experience, or the job skills that you need to be successful at this.
oh, I get it. And which I mean, I'm sure people. I know artists who are terrified to do a podcast,
Yeah.
and yet they could speak fine at a convention. And I'm like, you do realize that you sitting at your table talking to a fan who loves your cover, and you having a 20-minute conversation with them is the exact same thing here.
Right.
And if it goes south, guess what? You could just leave. It's even better. It's even better because you're doing it virtually, so you can leave at any point. And it's like, but people and artists are so terrified of this, and I'm like, I don't think you guys get it. Like I don't think and they're like, what if I mess something up? What if I do something? I'm like, we're talking about how you drew this cover. Like nobody's gonna eat your head off. Like, but like I find it fascinating how people are just terrified of this. And then I was speaking to an artist, and he stopped doing commissions at shows because he'd be all day down at this, and instead now he doesn't do commissions at shows, or he does like one. And whoever gets there first gets it, and then he does it in like an hour and a half, and then he's done, and then he's signing stuff and talking to fans, and he walks around, and he doesn't want to do commissions at cons anymore because he wants to engage at the con. And I find it fascinating. But again, I don't have the itch to do this because it just seems so freaking hard.
Yeah, I mean, and writing and drawing are two different animals too. I think that if you want to do both, you really should practice both. Because I don't think just because you're a good artist makes you a good writer. Because I think that's sometimes what happens with some artists is like, oh, I can write my own story, and well, you can kind of tell sometimes. So I want to.
There's a good word to use, and it's a nice word. It starts with an E. It's called an editor.
There you go.
Editors can be very helpful. I'm sure you've read comics where you're like, this book could have used an editor. It could have used an editor on a spell check level. It could have used an editor on a story level. It could have used an editor on a plot level.
Sure.
It could have used an editor for 4 pages, and then the rest was fine. I read a book where the first 4 pages were a disaster, and then the rest of the whole 5 and like 75% were perfect. And I'm like, if you just took out those 4 pages of this book, we would have been great.
Interesting.
It was the weirdest thing I've ever read because the 4 pages in the book at the start of it were useless. But the rest of the book was fine. And I'm like, somebody should have said, hey, just take this out, put out an 18-page first issue, not a 22-page, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Weird.
Editors are fun and they're useful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they help you learn too.
So yeah, no. I find this whole thing fascinating. I find it all interesting. And then obviously, I mean, it's just, excuse me. Yeah. But even going further into that, because you mentioned something about the business, and I think it's interesting also, is that obviously when you're working, and we'll use Bad Bug. Bad Bug has a lot of corporate structure in it.
Mm-hmm.
Corporate's not the right word. They have a lot of structure in what they do.
Sure.
And what did you say?
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah. A lot of moving parts, but I think there's a lot of structure in what they do. Mm-hmm. And I say that as a compliment. And then obviously when you do it yourself, I don't think people realize how daunting it is. Because my understanding, and I ran a Kickstarter for this show, and it's not a comic, but obviously if you're doing a comic Kickstarter, You gotta write it. You gotta, if you're not drawing, you gotta find an artist. You gotta find a colorist, an inker, a letterer. If you're not doing any of that, then you gotta find cover artists. Then you gotta figure out logos if you can't build them yourselves. Then you got to assemble the Kickstarter. Then I'm missing probably a bunch of stuff here, and I know well I'm missing a bunch of stuff. And then after that, you gotta market the Kickstarter. You gotta push it out. You gotta say, hey, everybody, my Kickstarter's live. And then finally, when it's all done, you gotta figure out where you're gonna print your books. You got to figure out what you're going to do with the money with it. You got to figure out, hey, how do I deploy this the best way? You got all the little trinkets and stickers and all that stuff that you promised everybody. You got to then fulfill it and bag and board it. And there you go. That's like 9 months.
Yeah. And a lot of these guys that are doing it now, some of them by themselves and some of them with a big team, like Bad Bug, they crank out, like a dozen or so of these Kickstarters a year. They're just doing one a month for different books or for other projects that they're participating in. May not necessarily be their Kickstarter, but they're helping promote. So it is a lot of work, and I think not only is it a lot of work, but it's a lot of just attention to detail and making sure that you're fairly meticulous with certain things. It involves like different parts of your brain. So like if you are the one that's largely being creative on the book, like a writer or an illustrator, you still have to be able to put together a budget. You still have to be able to put together like a business plan, for yourself.
This is something that's interesting, is that this is my experience. So I love money, and I run a business, and I know my numbers really, really well. Like I know the cost of goods off the top of my head.
Sure.
And people are like, how do you know this? But it's also that a bunch of stuff doesn't change in the business. So when I'm buying cards, the wholesale cost of the card doesn't change per card.
Right.
On the basis. So it's very easy when you're buying 19 SKUs, but they're all at X amount of dollars. But at the same time, I just did my taxes, and this is why this is relevant to me. But I think it's really, really interesting, because if you don't know your numbers, this is why campaigns get delayed. This is why problems occur. This is why things get all messed up. This is why also things happen. And then also it's just like, the finances of a Kickstarter are so complex. And it's also how much capital are you going to deploy? And I think everybody has this grand idea that I'm going to go drop X amount on this, but it's also a business. At a certain point, this has to become a business. And I think this is where this gets so interesting and so complicated. And I look at it and I'm like, how the hell did this campaign make any money?
Well, and again, like sometimes there's these campaigns that are done just solely by one creator, like myself. So whatever money comes in is money that goes towards making the products that I said I was going to make, but then the rest of it goes into investing back into my business, versus someone who's just a writer who has to use a large portion of that Kickstarter money in order to pay their creative team. So it's much more challenging, I think, in certain ways to do it that way. Mainly because if you don't get it, then like you can't make the book, versus like if I don't get the Kickstarter money for, which I just earlier today crossed my funding goal. So I'm super happy about that. But if I didn't get it, I could still make the book myself, like I don't need to pay someone else to do it.
It's also, and sorry to interrupt, but my experience is that a lot of people also push the money in, and so they'll do the book and they'll get it all done, and they'll be $6,000 in before they even launch. So
right.
the book is done. And look, I buy products and I use my own money and then I pay myself back. But that's incredibly stressful when you have product that could take 9 months to move. And I've had product that has taken 3 or 4 years to move. It's great. I also had product that I bought that moved in 25 minutes, but that's not the point here. So I've experienced both sides of the coin. But it's really stressful when you have 6, 7, 8 grand in and you don't know if you're going to recoup your money. It could, I don't know how you feel about it, but I've been in both situations. It is not easy to navigate it. So I'm sympathetic, but I think that's where this is so fascinating, is that because as a consumer, I just want my product, right? So I don't really care so much. And I'm also unique because I understand the struggles of this as an interviewer and speaking to enough people. But if I'm just a Kickstarter backer, I mean, I don't know how many of them are really aware of how much effort and how much money and capital and work and effort goes in and man hours goes into it.
Oh,
Whether
yes.
and I think once you understand it, not saying you want to know how the sausage is made, but knowing even a little bit of it, it helps to understand why something is what it is.
Oh yeah. I mean, it costs several $1,000s per comic, and that's not even including anything else that you would put into it to market it, or try to create other merchandise in order to get the word out about it. So that's a whole nother separate cost. But yeah, it is not only a lot of budgeting and cost analysis, but I think once you do one or two of them, you start to get a feel for, what you need, what your, margin should be, where you need to be in order to be able to make the book, versus where you would like to be in order to turn profit. Lots of things like that that can change and will certainly sort of evolve as you go from project to project. But I will say, from my perspective and the projects that I do, I don't do as many because I really can't, service. I would have to take an entire month or two off of my other regular jobs in order to be able to, get a really consistent amount of Kickstarter campaigns out there, akin to.
So let me ask this though, because I am a strong believer. So I have a 9 to 5 job and I have an eBay business on the side. I don't want my eBay business to be my main job for a variety of reasons. My eBay business is fun, but it's also spotty. So my main job is going to be my breadwinning. I also have a 401k at my main job. I have healthcare. All that stuff is worth money and it's helpful. And so the way I view my main job is that it's my base income. And I don't see why I can't have a nice, successful little side business and have my main job and it changes my income bracket. And
Right.
I think sometimes people, it's just my experience, is that why can't you have a main job and do 3 campaigns a year and have a good time doing comics and not, and then eventually you hope that your comics take care of themselves, right? Because that's what I see, at least, and what I you run my business as. And I think that sometimes people just want to go balls to the walls and they don't think about saying, wait a second, like I have best of both worlds. Because again, it's really, really complicated to run this like a business in which that once you cross that line, you got to crank out like 25 of these a year to and you got to really know what you're doing. And you also probably need some serious starting capital to do it too.
Yeah, I mean, if your goal is to self-publish comic books as a full-time gig, yeah, for sure. I mean, the way that I do things, I'm doing books for other people as my full-time gig, and that in and of itself can be stressful, because it is spotty. It's not, like you get paid every 2 weeks. You consistently know that that's coming in. It doesn't have the healthcare or anything like that. It's a freelance, type situation.
It's also the idea that at any given moment, anything could change.
Right. Right. And again, I feel as though I have the skill set to be able to kind of pivot if I need to pivot. Um, I did storyboarding for quite a while before I did comics, and that paid really well. It actually paid much better than comic books. But I didn't like it as much, and the industry was changing a bit, and so I just decided I wanted to try out comics for a little while, and I've been able to do pretty well with it so far. Right now I'm trying to increase my cover commission number, as well as my regular commissions. I think everybody's trying to do that, really. But that's the one area of my business I feel like I could definitely grow.
So let's actually talk about that a little bit and even just changing because obviously I feel comics have changed. And I'll tell you what's changed in my business. Bad girl art was doing great, was ascending, was doing nicely, a little bit diminishing returns, but not significant. And that thing took a nosedive. And I have no problem stating that Zenoscope has taken a nosedive
Hmm.
on a bunch of books, and a bunch of other companies have as well, where the value just isn't there right now, and they're really hard to move. And I'm moving out of that space heavy. And there's other stuff, and even other artists are oversaturated and overplayed and overutilized, and they've taken a nosedive, or they're just harder to move. And so I'm just selling books dirt cheap and just sitting on the sidelines for a while with stuff. I'm not done with comics. I think stuff is going to come back, but clearly there was a shift in the market, at least as far as my eBay goes and when I'm selling. And I've noticed the same thing across a lot of stuff where a lot of stuff is extremely similar, and I just don't see it. I see that some of it is still moving, some artists are still moving heavily on Kickstarter, but I don't see the value. And comics is oversaturated, and a lot of cover artists are too. So I mean that's where I'm curious how you feel, because at this stage there's more projects than ever being crowdfunded, being published, being put out there. There's more variance than there's ever been in the history of comics, because I can go to Marvel, and then if I order 3,000 copies, I could get my own variant in my eBay store if I wanted to. I mean, all I have to do is legitimately make 2 phone calls, and then I'll drop. I don't know what they're going to charge me, but it'll run me like 7 grand, give or take. But I can have my own variant,
Right.
which is crazy. But so can everybody else. So I'm curious how you feel, because clearly a lot of changes have occurred in the last 5 years.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I feel like there's probably going to be a period of consolidation. I would imagine that at some point, smaller groups that have been growing will probably start to bring more and more other books under their umbrella. And I feel like, those types of smaller indie groups will probably, begin to grow a little bit more and consolidate more books together. And I'm not really sure where it will go, beyond that. Because I mean, I do feel like I'm starting to notice within this sphere, there seems to be a lot more people wanting the digital comics rather than the physical comics. And I don't know if it's the price point or easeability of just reading them.
I think it's three
Those-
things. I could tell you what I think, right? So at this point, I love reading comics and comicsology.
yeah,
$6 Amazon, right? I read a lot of Zaniscope stuff, and it's great because I read it. I'm sitting in my bed. It's 10:30 at night. I don't feel like turning on the lights, and I have my iPad, and I just scroll through a comic. And if it's a bad comic and I hate it, or like it's a weird book, I'm like, oh fuck this. I don't like it. I return it, right? But I
sure,
didn't pay for it. So for me, and I understand comicsology is, or whatever it is now, I haven't touched it in a while, but whatever it is, it's just cheap, right? Or Global Comics, they do something similar and I have a Shonen Jump app where I read a lot of manga too. It's $3 a month, and I can pretty much get an unlimited manga, right? And it comes out like every week, One Piece. So I'm reading it, and it's great because it's right on my iPad, and I don't have to worry about buying something and storing something because I just want to read it. So I
right,
think it's accessibility. I think it's price point. And I also think people have so much shit now that they don't know where to store half this stuff, because I'm running out of space. I
yeah,
have no more space. And the space that I have, it's my merchandise that I'm selling in my eBay store. So I don't want your book physically. Like I want the physical stuff that I really want to cherish, because most of this stuff I don't want. But then if I buy it, like I gotta fucking store it or throw it out. But then if I throw out a $20 book, I just threw out $20.
yeah. I've had a couple of people come to me with similar, sentiments about the physical actual, book. And, a couple of people saying, I've been told I can't buy anymore. I just don't have the space. And then a lot of international backers, they don't want to pay all the extra stuff, so they just would prefer the digital. They don't have to worry about shipping at all. and it works out better for everybody. Because then I don't have to pay for the larger amount of physical copies either. I can just deliver the digital copies very easily. And I'm starting to notice, I don't know if other people are, but there are more and more of these smaller indie comic websites, like a Comixology, that you can buy indie comics from. I've been approached by a couple myself, who are just basically creating a platform where creators can go and put their books up there, and they get a percentage of the sale, and so do the runners of the website.
I mean, I'll be honest. I think they all have it wrong, and I think they all have it backwards. I've said this before. I think all those websites should offer everybody's comic for free. And hear the theory out. Why I say the way I say it. They should figure out how to put ads that in the book, and then the ads would pay out, or they could offer it either way, right? You could offer an ad-free position, or if your book you think you're going to do 10,000 reads, the ads would update automatically and it'll go to the highest bidder. So it'd be almost like Google Ads in the middle of the book.
Sure.
And because that could actually be way more profitable if you have a hit book and everybody's reading it, and it would work well with webtoon stuff. Because then now it's based on viewership, so that if your comic, every issue you drop gets 30,000 reads digitally, the ad rate is going to be much higher. And because I think the future of media is free, because all these young kids, they don't want to pay for media. They want it for free with ads. So I actually think that's the future. It's just a matter of how do you get viewership up, and how do you get a lot of traffic to your website so that you get those high reads for the advertisers, so that it's profitable for them to reach an audience and it's profitable for the website and the creator. And that's whoever figures that out is going to be worth billions of dollars.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, actually.
I mean, it's nothing new. It's nothing new. People think like, oh man, that's a great idea. It's legitimately nothing new. It's just a matter, because that's what Google Ads does. It's legitimately viewership with ads. That's what every podcast does.
I mean, that's what basically a YouTube video is. You're getting to watch it for free. You just have to watch some ads.
But I like the idea that every 4 pages, and then you could really specifically target. So if you can figure out the demographic, or the demographic's changing, you can target ads in there, or you could even go deeper and you could target ads based on profiles, which is even sicker. And so now you can really micro target people. So if I love Jack Daniels, you could put in an ad for Jack Daniels in the book, and then you're really targeting me. And that's where I think it is, because all these kids have no problem with the ads. They just don't want to pay for the content.
Right. No, that makes sense. I hear you.
That's the future of digital comics.
Yeah.
And people are just not ready for it, but it's coming.
Some are.
Yeah, I guess some are, but like it's tricky. But like, I find it fascinating because, again, I think I love digital comics because when I want to read something, I just want to read it, and I want to read it cheaply.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to spend $12 for a digital.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. No, I mean, I see where some people can, charge the same amount, for the physical as the digital, as far as the value goes. But I mean, there is something to be said for you're getting a physical thing. So there's more cost in making a physical product. So I could justify making it a little bit cheaper for the digital product. Again, especially I think because it is kind of a fleeting thing, like it's not like a physical, tangible thing that could then again be collected and traded for even greater value because there's less of them.
No, again, I find this interesting, but again, I just want to read comics, and I want to read them cheaply. I pay $3 for Shonen Jump, and I have access to hundreds of thousands of chapters of manga.
Yeah.
on my iPad for $3 every month, $36 for the year.
That's
It's awesome.
yeah.
It's awesome. So at any point, I could just read Naruto, and I have some of this stuff fully. But again, I'll give an example. Right, I forget what it is. Strawberry 100%. Right, it's an off the beat anime manga. I don't want to buy it. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to physically have it. But
Mhm.
it's also the idea that if I also like a book and I read it digitally, it's a good chance I might buy it.
For
So
sure. Yeah. Oh,
that's what I find it interesting, and I find the whole space of where comics is going fascinating. And again, I am very pessimistic. It also doesn't help the economy. Because that's scaring the shit out of everybody. I don't know how you feel about that, but I've noticed it. So I have a theory, and I'm curious how you feel about my theory. COVID hit, everybody was home, and Kickstarter boomed as a result of that because people had money, people had less options to spend their money, and people were like, "Cool, I'll buy, more stuff on Kickstarter." And then I think that effect lasted a while, and then now I think that effect is drained out, and I think now people are scared out of their right minds because nobody has any clue what's going to happen in the world in the next 6 months.
mhm. I don't disagree. um,
Do you agree or disagree?
no, I don't. I don't disagree. I agree with you. I think that, like you just said, post COVID, we had a lot of extra cash and we had less things to keep us entertained. So things like Kickstarter were a great investment for a lot of people. And we're starting to see the decline of that because we're further and further away from it. But because we're in a very different economic climate right now, acutely, yeah, this next 6 months is going to be very interesting to see how things go.
It's funny. It's funny because I am seeing people buy more high-end cards from me right now, like $40, $50 cards. And I'm seeing people buy less and less comics from me. And this is just what I'm seeing in my business. And the reason why is that I think people are saying, cool, these are super limited cards. There's only maybe 10, 20, 30 of them. And I think they're going to maintain value. I don't think my audience and my clients necessarily think they're going to go up from like $50 to $300 tomorrow, but they also realize that they might go down to 28, but it's not going to drop to zero. And
Sure.
so I'm noticing a lot more people buying a lot more expensive stuff or trying to buy more expensive stuff from my store. And they're not really buying a comic book that used to trade for 40. And I just sold one for like 22.
Yeah.
So like it's rough. And so, I mean, and I get it. I get it. And I also see people lowballing me too for stuff. So like I don't know in which that it's tricky, and I mean I'll be honest. I mean I'm taking a break from Kickstarter because I'm a little bit scared of where things are going. I don't think we're done. I don't think like the world's gonna end in a nuke blast. I want to make that crystal clear, everybody. I don't think that's where we're at, but I don't know. I don't have a sense of predictability where I don't know how big the hill is, and I don't know how big the fall down of the hill is on this roller coaster we're on. And until I have a better sense, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but like I feel that's an issue, and I also feel that other people are saying cool. I feel expectations have changed. That might be a good way to put it.
Could be. To be honest with you, I am not entirely convinced that we're going to see a major decline. I still think there is something to be said. I think for investing in this community and these projects, um, but you are not wrong about the fact that things seem to be slowing down a little bit. But I think a
I'm
lot of
very
it,
cautious. I'm very cautious. It
yeah,
is a good position, and
sure,
I want to wait and see how things play out
right,
before. Like I'm not done with comics. I want to make that crystal clear. I'm not leaving this community per se, but I'm also saying, cool. If I was going to back 5 projects, maybe I'll back 3
sure,
because I just want to see where things are going, and I want to have a little bit more cash on hand because I don't know how long the current environment's going to last, and I also don't know where things are going, and so I'm just playing cautious for a reason, because just sitting back and breathing. Also, it doesn't help that tax season is right now. So once tax season is over, I'm also going to have a little bit more liquidity.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I absolutely feel that. This is one of those weird times. It's like I feel like I should have launched my project just a little sooner, but it is what it is. I've been just doing my best to try to get. I want to get two Kickstarters out this year if I can for Confederate Monster. I've got plenty of other books that I've contributed my work to that are going to be on Kickstarter this year. And I'm just, again, I'm hopeful that, like we were talking earlier in this our little interview here, about how all the synergy of all the different projects sort of helps to build your individual sort of fan base. So
No. I get it. I get it. I'm not. I have a very different viewpoint, because I experience everything from a business side, and from buying product and selling product and engaging in it and seeing what clients are buying or what they're not buying. So I get a very different sense of where people are at. Also, the community I'm in, also it gets a different vibe, and I get when you have clients that are reducing, and when clients are buying more and more and more and more stuff, and they're tolerant with you too, which is a whole different thing. And also, I've seen it all, right, on that side. So again, I don't know the creative side as much as I know more of the business stuff. But again, I mean, I could be wrong on my thought process, but I just want to wait and see. But
sure.
again, I get this synergy. I like synergy. I wish there was more of it with me. I would appreciate it from everybody. I would appreciate it. I also would appreciate if everybody says, "Hey, Andrew, how's your day going?" That also means a lot to everybody.
Yeah.
So, but after me jesting and complaining, there you go. But yeah, no. So obviously, I mean, there's that, and you got a bunch of stuff going on. Yeah, obviously, you're funded, which helps.
Yeah, it just happened earlier today. So just almost a week. I was hopeful that we could get it funded within a week, but I was a day late. But anyway, I'm still very grateful that we're funded basically within a week. And we got plenty more time with the campaign to keep growing it, get more eyes on it.
Let me ask this, because I'm always curious about this. Where I've heard a lot of debates on this, and I'm curious how you feel on it. Do you think that it's better to ask for a lower amount, or the bare minimum of what you need? Or do you think it's better to ask what you really need? Because that's also a debate. Because once you're funded,
Right.
there's a few things that happen. Obviously, Kickstarter wants to push it a little bit more to a degree, and their algorithm pushes it more. Also, people feel more comfortable, right?
Right.
It's hard to be, obviously, I know certain people are going to fund, right? Tom Hutchinson is going to always fund, and I try to be backer number one. And then if I'm interviewing Tom, I'm like, so who's that asshole who's backer number one, Tom? Yeah. I always ask when I'm somebody's number one backer, and the first one, I'm like, who's that guy who's that number one? He must be a really handsome fella. Um, so yeah. But beyond the joke, I sometimes don't feel comfortable backing until something is funded.
Sure.
And so what is that like for you? Because I think it's really interesting, because I know plenty of creators set their goal at $500.
Yeah. I mean, and I get that. I think for me, I want to make sure, from my perspective, I want to make sure that I have my bare minimum to be able to do what I feel like I need to do in order
You don't
to.
want to fuck yourself, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that I've noticed in doing campaigns over the years is, if you're not accounting for everything, you can really screw yourself over. I've done a couple campaigns in the beginning where I wasn't factoring in enough for shipping. So I wound up having to put in some more of my own money in order to make sure I could ship it all. But nowadays, I think I've gotten it to a good place where I understand what it's going to be, and I, estimate correctly, or even overestimate slightly to make sure that I know I have enough. And whatever I have above and beyond that is just going to help me to be able to take more time off to do more of the book. And that's basically what I tell people. You know, if I were working as a writer on a book with art team, you know, I would love to put a stretch goal on there that would just help me to be able to pay the artists more. You know, I heard that through, I can't remember who it was, but there was a live stream the other night, and I was listening to this guy talk about his stretch goals, and one of his first stretch goals was to be able to pay their artists like an extra like $200 a page. And I thought, wow, what a stretch goal! Like that's a pretty cool, you know, thing for artists and the community, and just being able to give money back to those who are, you know, making a lot of this stuff come true. But anyway, I definitely lean on the side of, you know, making sure that I have enough to do the bare minimum, and then anything else I can just reinvest in the book.
I think it's interesting. Again. I mean, this is why I'm not going to be good at Kickstarter because it's so tricky on that balance. In which do you put where's your bare minimum,
Yeah.
and then how do you reinvest your capital in? Because I've had this discussion with people, and the discussion did not go well on an interview. Where do you buy more books? Because that's good for the business, but is it necessarily good for the project?
Right.
And where does your extra capital go? Because again, if you could print an extra 200 bucks and then you go to cons and sell that, that doesn't directly help the campaign, but it helps you, and
Right.
it may keep the lights on, or it might create seed money for the next campaign, and then therefore you can go do it, and you're just further ahead when the next time you do this. And then, or do you make it a gloss cover, or do you add stickers, or do you add another 2 pages in there? Like, and this is where this gets really tricky because Kickstarter's not the be end, or it's not the be all or end all. There gets a point where it's like you got to move the book outside of Kickstarter too at some point, and you could put all the money to the Kickstarter, print all the books for Kickstarter, but then you have no product at a convention.
Right.
So it's a tricky situation, I guess.
Yeah, it can be for sure. And typically I lean on the side of, you know, reinvesting the money into being able to take time away from my day job in order to do more of the book, because I can get the book done faster that way. But you know, I do typically buy more of a run than I need, so that I have extra books to be able to sell, like you were saying, if I do go to a con. But I also have typically for these books that I've been doing for Confederate Monster, a tier where I give like a reduced catch up sale. So if someone wants to catch up on the book, you can get like, you know, issues 0 through 5 at a reduced price, but only the number that I have left from the last campaign. You know, so if I only have like 10 sets left from the last campaign, you know, those are going to go up for a sales price on the next campaign, just to help get new readers into it.
I know. Again, it's tricky. The whole business of Kickstarter is a tricky entity, and every business is tricky. And anybody who says every business is easy is just lying. Kickstarter is a tricky business because it's also how much capital you have with your first project. I mean, I had this conversation with somebody, and I said, "Do you believe in your first issue wholeheartedly?" They said, "Yeah," and I said, "Great. You should offset your book then, and you should let everybody know that you're offsetting your book before you even sell one of them,
Right.
because then you're fully in." And once you're fully into something, you will either burn out or you will be really, really, really right. And you will be making a lot of money. But if you fully believe, like if I'm to ever do a book, I'm gonna offset 3,000 copies of like cover A. And people are gonna think you're crazy. And I'm gonna let everybody know right in the first paragraph is I got 3,000 copies of cover A.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all in. So there you go. Just look at the guy. I mean, FedEx. Did you know the story of FedEx?
Enlighten me.
I just learned it. The guy, FedEx was a week away from closing. So he took his last $5,000 and he went to Vegas and played blackjack and got $27,000 playing blackjack that kept him alive for another 2 weeks.
Damn.
And then they got like a $70 million investment.
Wow.
So you want to talk about going all in.
Right.
There's something about that. And there's something about going all in and saying we're gonna figure this out. And that same mentality. But that's how I am. But I don't know. What do I know? But obviously you got a lot of stuff going on with this book. Obviously you spoke a little bit about this book, but a lot about the business, all that stuff. But I do want to back out of that, and I do want to talk a little bit about pop culture, because where do you think that's going? Because we touched upon it a little bit, but obviously pop culture, comics, ideas change, concepts change, books are fascinating. Like superheroes are sort of coming back a little bit right now.
A little bit.
So, like, where do you think comics are going in that regard, as far as stories go?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I definitely hear less people complaining about them than they once did. But yeah, no, I definitely feel like the manga, anime market has really sort of changed the landscape of how a lot of content's being kind of looked at that gets greenlit. I think a lot of it nowadays sort of has a little bit of that, manga anime, angle to it, to help again to be able to attract different audience. Like we were saying before, a lot of it's oversaturated, so we have to kind of play around with it, infuse different perspectives into things, create something new and different. And I don't know, I think for quite a long time there, we had properties that were being constructed, solely, well, maybe not solely, but largely with the influence of corporate algorithms of what's going to work and what's not, what's the best investment and what's not. But I feel like in the age of AI, I think there's actually going to be a need for, and maybe this is a controversial opinion, but I think there's actually going to be a need for more of a creative, traditional, almost like this 80s type era of, just creative thought that made some pretty maybe horrible crap, but at the same time, it also made some pretty interesting concepts that no one had ever heard about. And we'll see what happens from there. I don't know. I feel like there's a bit of a renaissance on the horizon, and maybe that's my.
I am the opposite. I mean, my AI position is very, very well known. I think AI is necessary, and I think AI has forced, because I think artists and I think writers in many ways have become stale, and I think they got a little too comfortable. And I think AI, and as AI is advancing, and I know this because AI is huge in the space where I work in my 9-to-5 job, which is accessibility. It's huge, and it's actually going to keep me employed, which is crazy. You think it would make me unemployed. It's going to do the exact opposite, because there's a lot of reasons why. Because AI bots need to be trained, AI bots need to be monitored, AI needs to be checked, reevaluated, concentrated, for lack of a better word here. And AI is just going to speed up accessibility. And when there's so much you got to do, it doesn't matter if AI takes out 50,000 issues when there's 5 million. But I think people have gotten stale. I think AI, especially with art, I think it's going to force artists to get more creative and also build their own signatures. Because I go into a comic shop and I legitimately saw 4 covers that looked all the same.
Right.
And I'm like, this is not good. This is not good. It used to be. And even with writing, I think AI is going to force that. But I'm also a big proponent of it, because I can't separate the idea of AI that solves cancer research from AI art. I can't separate those two things. And the reason why I can't separate it is because it's the same basis. That doesn't mean I have to buy the AI art, but I can't separate it because I boil it down to a basic concept. Right. And so I have a hard time as an individual of separating the two. And maybe it's me, and it could very well be me. I'm not necessarily going to go buy AI art, but I have a hard time separating it, and it could be a flaw in me, but that's how I view it, and I'm very open about it.
Sure.
So
I mean, I see it as a tool of inspiration, but as an artist, I don't necessarily see it as properly utilized as a fully formed methodology of creating final art. Again, I see it more as a tool. So you can use it to inspire yourself. You can use it to sort of play around with thoughts and how you might be able to conceptualize something outside of traditional means. But I agree. I think that AI will force us to have to, be more creative and whatever.
it already does in everything else, right? So accessibility, digital accessibility, AI has legitly changed the game where it was 57%, and AI will bring it up to 98%
Right.
for accessibility. That's a big jump.
Oh, sure.
And so again, if AI is going to force somebody to get better, and it's gonna also put some artists out of business. I'm sorry to say it. I hate to be the reality truth, but some people might have been able to get away with stuff, but now you have a competitor. And competitors make you stronger. And I'm sorry to sound like the asshole saying that, but I think it's good to have competition. And I think and look, sometimes you got to weed out. You're the brush under the tree. And I'm sorry, it's and my opinions are very controversial on that. But so sometimes some people have to go. I hate to say it.
Well, I mean, if you're not evolving and you're not challenging yourself to be different, because I think that those will be the artists that prevail are those who are very different and hard to replicate. So yeah, for sure.
I could name artists who came into the scene and were very different when they first came out. Senku Minaki, when she came out, she was very different. I think Brian Meligo, when he came into it, he was very different. Elias Shazudis was very different. And then we could even go backwards and go further back to Frank Miller. Frank Miller's style when he first dropped was that boxy, little bit sloppy, Batman, but it was so different when it dropped.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we have something that's different in this, and it's fascinating, and it's really cool. So, yeah, and then I think AI is going to force that, and I have no problem stating that.
Sure.
But I think we're going to get to a point where we're not going to know if it's AI or not. I think it's coming. I think it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be tough.
It could be scary. It could be scary. It could be also really, really interesting what's going to happen. And then the legality of it is going to be a nightmare. But
yeah, it really will be. I don't want to be a lawyer right now.
I don't want to be one either. And I'm not. And I'm not anybody else's lawyer either. So, I didn't go to law school and I didn't want to go. It was hard.
I can only imagine.
I didn't want to take the LSATs. I tried it and I read an LSAT book and I'm like, no, thank you. I'll pass. I'm good. I'm good.
Right.
I'd like to go home at night and watch cartoons. Thank you very much. But anyway, I do want to give you a chance to promote yourself. Where can people find you, bother you, back the campaign, check out everything you're doing, check out social media, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So you can find me on my social media. My handle is Dave Swartz Art. So you can find me on Facebook, X, Instagram is where I usually hang out. But you can also find my website at daveswartzart.com. And my Kickstarter is for my horror series, Confederate Monster, which is in its 5th issue. That's on Kickstarter live right now. You can find it. Go to any of my social media pages and you'll be able to find a link to it really quickly. I post about it daily. We just hit our funding goal, so we are now on to stretch goals. And we've got about 20 days left, so we've got plenty of time to see if we can unlock some more cool things for everybody.
And then I've been saying it, you have to back indie and you have to back people whose projects you want to see get made or you want to see what they can do. All that fun stuff, it goes a long way. You got to do that. Also follow people on social media. It goes a long way as well. And you heard all the social media there. But then even going further into what I do, and since it's my show, I promote myself. I am Pop Anime Comics on the Twitter, or the X as it is now called. I pop anime comics on the gram, or cool kids call it the Instagram. I still call it the gram. You can post things there. It's really cool. Pop anime comics on Facebook, pop anime comics on TikTok, pop anime comics on YouTube. Please subscribe, everybody. It means a lot to me. It really does. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy, and I appreciate subscribers. And then once you subscribe, go watch all my interviews. It'll only take you about 3,600 hours. It's a small ask, but it means the world to me. No, seriously though, if you do subscribe, there's an interview for everybody on my channel. I have about like 1,100 interviews. I've been doing this for a long time, and whether you're into anime, comics, wrestling, other pop culture, adult stuff, I got you covered. Cosplayers, all that fun stuff. Crypto, I got a few of those on there. So I got something for everybody on my channel. So have a fun time at it. Or you can just watch some micro content, or you can just go through my YouTube feed and look at really cool pictures that I put up every day that have no meaning. But I just like posting cool stuff up of SpongeBob just as Naruto, because why wouldn't I? Hey, my Instagram like community page, oh my god, it's like the best thing ever. So much fun. But anyway, I digress. And then my eBay store is this right here. Look for comics and collectibles. Come shop with us on eBay at Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. And I carry a lot of really cool stuff like this in my store. I carry stuff like this in my store. I tend to also carry stuff like this in my store. I would say that I carry this in my store, but that's gone. That's gone, and it will probably not service for another 10 to 20 years easy. It's a really expensive card. And it sold out quick. It's Diana Taurasi's retirement autograph 101 card. So that sold out quicker than I realized. So yes, I carry stuff like that, and I do have a very expensive Boston Celtic card right now in my store that I'm asking like a G for. And it's worth every penny. It's worth every penny. So if you're a Boston Celtics fan, it's the card, guys. Go buy it. Go buy it. But I digress. And then I'm going to be listing a bunch of NBA stuff in the next day or two. A bunch of comics are up there. And I am running a bunch of sales right now. So it is spring cleaning. So if you're looking for comic books, cards, pretty cheaply, well, I got you covered. And if you do not find something you want in my eBay store, ask me, because there's a good chance I have it. And if I do have it, I'll list it. And if I don't have it, I know somebody who does. So that's everything I got going on. Again, it's Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. Link is down below. And that's all I got, everybody. And I'm going to give you the final word.
Support the community. Support us. Support everything that nerds love.
I don't think I could have said that any better myself, everybody. And that is a wrap.